Hey everyone, welcome to the special episode of Maharani Talks, and I'm your host Mahati Rangarajan. As you would be aware, there's been a lot of talk about the current COVID vaccines. It's been about 2 weeks since India rolled out its COVID vaccination drive against the ongoing pandemic. While the current priority is, of course, to provide these vaccines to health professionals and other frontline workers, many of us are eagerly awaiting to take the shot or would rather like to delay it. And the questions over the administering of Covaxin vaccine by Bharat Biotech to the general public before completing its phase 3 clinical trial has added to this confusion and anxiety. The other vaccine available is, of course, Covishield by Serum Institute of India, which has completed all the 3 phases of clinical trials. So in this episode, I discuss with Dr. Pavitra Venkata Gopalan, a virologist whose specialization has been in the field of coronaviruses and has spent many years studying the virus. She's also the director of Care Health Diagnostic Lab. So we discussed the basic differences between these two vaccines, the ongoing concerns over Covaxin, and the doubts often people ask her when they want to get the shot. So listen on. Thank you so much, Dr. Pavitra, for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Madhi, for inviting me.
It's my pleasure. So for our listeners, could you share a little bit about yourself?
I am Pavitra. I studied in Chennai. I have a undergraduate degree in biotechnology, and I started developing an interest in virology for my PhD. And I looked up a bunch of different viruses, and it so happened that when I was ready for my PhD, coronaviruses was a hot topic. I know most of you haven't heard of it now, heard of it before this, but it was actually causing a serious fear in 2003, 2004. It was called SARS.
Yeah.
So that field was kind of hot and like fashionable, you can call it in the science world. And I was able to get into a lab that did some research on coronaviruses, and then I never thought that it'll come in so handy about almost a decade later now. So that's my background.
Okay. And I know that you did your PhD from Arizona State University.
Yeah.
Could I know what exactly was your specialization?
Yeah. So, you know how PhDs are. It sounds fancy, but you're actually working on a tiny portion of a tiny thing in a tiny area. The broad study of my project was understanding how different parts of the coronavirus protein interact with each other to actually form the virus. So I studied one protein called the envelope protein. It's called the E protein.
Okay.
If you've been taking COVID PCR, sometimes they say you can sequence for the E gene. That's the protein the gene that I studied.
All right. And obviously, everyone's talking about due to the pandemic, it's become such a hot topic. I'm guessing you must have been flooded with, people wanting to talk to you.
So I haven't actually done any work on coronaviruses since 2012. I switched gears. Now I run a diagnostic center. But what happened was when this virus came along, there were all these myths that came along. And, my dad is your typical WhatsApp uncle. He loves reading these forwards and believing whatever comes on there. And I got to an argument with him. I said, how can you believe all this rubbish? And he's like, how do you know? I'm like, boss, this is what I have a PhD on. And so his college group meets about once a month for breakfast. They call themselves Sapad Raman. And he said, why don't you give a talk to my friends? Because if I'm believing it, they're also going to believe it. So that's how it started. I made a very informal presentation, gave a talk about coronaviruses over Suda Pongal and Sambar Vada. And so from there, it sort of got picked up. And it turns out I'm the only Tamilian that actually has a PhD in coronaviruses.
Okay.
So a lot of people have reached out to me and had their doubts clarified, lots of talks, lots of interviews initially it was thrilling, but after a while it was like, I'm answering the same question. So, but now there's a lot more new questions. So I'm a lot more active now doing this.
Okay. So I first want to start off with, could you tell our listeners what exactly is the difference between the coronavirus now and how is it different from the SARS one?
You have fruits, right? There are different types of fruits. There's mangoes, and then we have different types of mangoes. You have Alfonso and you have Banganapalli. That's sort of the difference.
Okay.
They're both mangoes. They're both delicious. They are, but they're slightly different. That's the difference between the previous SARS that came in and now this virus, which causes COVID-19. It's also called SARS coronavirus 2. Now, just like how the mangoes are different, there are differences in how they spread, how they behave. The original SARS virus, which came in 2003, 2004, was again originated in China. And it did spread a little bit, but it was only spreading when people were having symptoms. So it was easy to find people that were positive, isolate them. But this COVID-19 virus is actually spreading before a person is showing symptoms. So you could be perfectly healthy and you could be spreading the virus, and then you would fall sick about 2, 3 days later. So it has been much harder to control the spread of this simply because of how it's difficult to identify an infection without having any sort of symptoms.
But is it more infectious than SARS?
Uh, Seems like it, yes. Yes, it is spreading more efficiently between people. This could be a mechanism of the virus itself, but it also could be a mechanism of how the spread is happening, where you don't know that it's spreading, right? You can only control something that you know is spreading, but if you don't know,
Yeah.
you have a small family gathering, nobody has any symptoms, you have a nice quiet dinner at home, and then 3 days later someone falls sick, but they've been spreading the infection for the last 3 days. So everybody at that dinner is now at least exposed to the virus and more probably carrying the infection.
Right.
So it is definitely infectious, more infectious than what we thought it was.
It's actually interesting you mentioned that, doctor, because recently, I think a day or 2 days back, Dr. Fauci also mentioned that how the virus is actually showing pre-symptomatic or even asymptomatic spread.
So, like Dr. Fauci said, the challenge has been the symptomatically or asymptomatically. So it is a problem that we have learned to tackle. Initially, we were not aware of it in the beginning, but now we are, and we have to take the measures to control it.
Okay. And now, of course, everyone's, talking about the vaccines that are there. India has rolled out the vaccines on January 16th. It's been almost 2 weeks now. And the two main vaccines are Covishield and Covaxin. And you said it on your Insta page that you got your second dose of Covishield. Could you talk about your experience?
Yeah, I got my first dose of Covishield. The second dose is 2.5 weeks away, 2 weeks away now.
Oh, okay.
So I run a diagnostic center, and that puts me as part of the frontline healthcare workers.
Yeah.
So I was able to take a letter from my lab saying, this is the lab that I run, so please give the vaccine. So I was able to receive the vaccine based on that letter. My experience was nothing. It's just getting an injection. So my arm was sore. I didn't have any fever or anything, but I was tired that day. Now, I have to mention here that I am relatively quite healthy. I don't have allergies. I don't have any other underlying conditions. So it was a rather smooth sailing for me.
And you're also a mother nursing a 4-month-old. Did you have that fears of getting the vaccine?
So this, I didn't expect this to blow up so much, but so I understand how this vaccine is developed, the science behind the vaccine that is being developed, which is Covishield. I know that there is no way I am going to give myself an infection or my baby the infection. I could only see the plus side where if at all I take this vaccine, I'm going to have antibodies against COVID. My body is going to make that. We still don't know if it gets into breast milk or not. There's been no research on that. If it does, my baby is going to be protected against COVID because he's not eligible for the vaccine.
Yeah.
So to me, it was a no-brainer to take that vaccination because it just made sense to me. I had zero fears. I had zero apprehension about taking this vaccine for myself as a nursing mother.
So you took an informed decision.
Yes.
Okay. I want to talk about those two vaccines. Covishield was, of course, given by Serum Institute of India, that was licensed by AstraZeneca, Oxford. And the other is Covaxin, which is Hyderabad-based Bharat Biotech. Could you tell me what is the underlying difference between these two vaccines?
So vaccines are basically vehicles that carry infectious particles or portions of infectious particles, and that primes our body for an oncoming or an actual infection. Both Covishield and Covaxin have been built on solid vaccine technology. I'll talk about Covaxin first because that uses a more classical technology. So you want your body to build an antibody against the virus, right? So the best way to do it is actually take the virus. but you don't want the infection.
Yeah.
Right? So what Covaxin did is ICMR scientists were able to grow from an infected patient, they were able to take COVID-19 virus and grow it in culture. What happens is they grew it in culture. It's actually technically a challenging thing to do. Not all viruses grow in culture outside the body. They grow it up, you grow it in large quantities, and then you count how much of the virus is there in a 1 ml or whatever. And then you inactivate it. Inactivate it in the sense you kill it in such a way that the virus still looks like the virus, but it cannot infect.
Okay.
So that it's called an inactivated vaccine, and it's solid technology, and it works. It's worked for a lot of vaccines. That is what Covaxin is doing, which is done by Bharat Biotech. Now, Covishield is actually more sexy in terms of science because it is using what was until now considered theoretical, where you have a very weak virus, not a SARS virus, a very weak virus called an adenovirus. They use a chimpanzee adenovirus, which cannot replicate in humans. And then they've made it carry a portion of the spike protein, which is where antibodies are made against. And that is being given to us as to develop the antibodies against in our body. So that is a recombinant vaccine vector technology. So both are based out of solid science. Both are designed to elicit great immune responses.
Okay. But of course, the difference is Covishield has gone through all 4 phases of trial and is completely, deemed in terms of safety and efficacy and immunogenicity. But that's not the case with Covaxin. In fact, there's a lot of furor over, the transparency of data. It's still going through phase 3 trials. So was it needed for them to push it through?
So Covishield is just done phase 3. So phase 4 is what happens after it's given to the public and the company tracks any adverse events.
Yeah.
So yes, the testing and the data of Covishield has been a lot more systematic and transparent. Covaxin, I mean, based on the vaccine design, it seems safe, but yes, having the data would always be better. I'm not sure how or why it got approved. It would have been nicer for everybody if we had the data solid. That being said, Bharat Biotech does make some of our more trusted vaccines, so it's not a sham or anything. It just could have been better. The data, the sharing, and all that.
So yeah, I don't think the safety aspect is so much in question as in why they haven't been transparent. In fact, those who are administered Covaxin vaccine, it comes with a consent form where the participants are informed. They have to sign the form, and I think they have to be followed up after that.
Right.
And it's in clinical trial mode. And does that mean that anyone who gets Covaxin is part of that clinical trial?
I have no idea how trials are conducted because that's a whole area of specialization that involves statisticians, epidemiologists, bioethics specialists, and clinicians, nurses. So I have no idea what a clinical trial mode even means. I think we're all hearing this term for the first time.
Okay. And from what I get from my circle of family and friends is what I can say is, if it's Covishield, yes, let's go ahead and take it. If it's Covaxin, let's wait it out, go back to, practicing all the norms that, we continue to do. And maybe after more solid data comes out, we could take the vaccine. So you can understand why people are anxious because they haven't been transparent with how the vaccine works.
Yeah, actually your family is doing something that makes perfect sense. That's what I would do too. It just so happened that I was offered Covishield because Covaxin does give a lot more criterion and warnings than Covishield does. So, it seems like the most logical thing to do is to wait it out if your only option is Covaxin. I'm not suggesting one versus the other. I'm simply saying if you don't have an option and if you can afford to continue remaining safe, perhaps you can and then wait for the data to come. That being said, you're not going to get COVID from Covaxin.
Yeah. It's more about whether, any other adverse reactions. In fact, their phase 1 trial paper has been published in Lancet, the peer-reviewed medical journal. And they clearly mentioned that the consent form does not mention that though the risk is rare, but it's not completely eliminated, the risk of antibody-dependent enhancement, ADE, and vaccine-associated enhanced respiratory disease. So a lot of participants were left a little, when they'd come to know about it from an article, rather from the company itself, that why they're not being transparent.
So, see, antibody-dependent enhancement is a very complex situation that most of the time doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's rare.
It is rare, but it is serious complication. It is a serious complication. And it is very much the reality if you're talking about other viruses like dengue and all that. There has been no evidence of ADE, antibody dependent enhancement, against any coronavirus infection. But because the vaccine strain, the vaccine that was used to make Covaxin is different from, in small places, from what variants are currently circulating, we may be having some suboptimal antibody response, which could theoretically result in antibody dependent enhancement. I mean, there is a lots of ifs and buts here.
That's true. Okay. So in your opinion, you would advise people could, if they have the luxury of waiting, and if the only option is Covaxin, they can wait it out.
If they can, but you don't. But if you have to take it, just make sure you follow the company's pamphlet of who should not be taking it. I think they have. If you have severe allergic reactions, if you have, I think if you have any immunosuppressive conditions, to not take it for the time being.
Okay. And what are the common myths that you're facing now in terms of vaccine? Do people ask, can we freely roam about?
Well, that is, I can understand that. But for me, the funniest questions that I'm getting is, but is it safe? I'm like, COVID is not safe. The vaccine is safe. So that's the part that really baffles me, because everybody was harping on about how, oh my God, we're all under all these restrictions. Let the vaccine come, it'll be open. And all of a sudden the vaccines are there. You have to take the vaccine for everybody to get it. And then only things can open up. But why the hesitation to get this vaccine? I don't understand. Whatever reaction you get from the vaccine is necessarily, again, I'm talking about a relatively healthy population, is necessarily less than risking getting COVID itself. That is the risk benefit analysis you have to do. Somebody said, I'm actually very healthy. Do I need the vaccine? I'm like, do you want COVID? That's the question that I keep asking people. I think initially there was a fear of the unknown, but now people are saying most people have gotten it and have recovered. Not all, most have gotten it and recovered, and they're not so scared anymore.
Yeah.
But even a 1% mortality rate is a huge, huge number. It is a huge number. So if you can protect yourself and those around you, you might as well just do it. The other myths are just, I don't know, there's other vaccines like Pfizer, it'll make you have abortions, and these are just rubbish that is thrown out by the anti-vaxxers that are out there, who generally have who believe the whole autism study, which was discredited a long time ago. You cannot get a miscarriage from taking any of the COVID vaccinations. You just cannot. We can get into the details of it, but then that will become a different podcast, not this. It'll be a BioGeek kind of podcast.
So when does the immunity kick in? Because a lot of people think it kicks in immediately.
Yeah, we wish. It takes about 2 weeks after the second dose.
Okay.
So from the day you get your first shot, you wait 6 weeks, continue to practice masking and distance, and then you are most likely going to have a good level of antibodies.
And usually what percentage of effectiveness is that? Is it 60% roughly or 70%? Because I know it's not complete protection.
Yeah, nothing is, no form of treatment is 100%, nothing in all of medicine. So the efficacy, which is in the clinical trial situation, I think Covishield gives about 70 something percent, 79, 78%, something like that. So effectiveness is what happens in real life. It's sort of like your car mileage under test driving conditions versus on the road. It comes to about 60 odd percent, which is still an excellent level of effectiveness. This is all effectiveness against severe COVID infection. None of these vaccines are here to prevent the infection. They are here to prevent severe infection. That is, they are here to reduce the number of cases that go to ICU and require oxygen support.
Okay.
Pfizer and Moderna have 99% efficacy, but their real life effectiveness is probably going to be around 80-85%. That's just how it works.
Okay. And what about, there's so much of mutation happening as well, right, doctor, with the UK variant. And now there is a South African variant and there's a Brazilian variant.
Yeah.
So what happens in such cases? Already, I think there are about roughly 170 cases of the UK variant in India. So how effective will these vaccines be against these variants?
A simple answer, I don't know. The logical answer would be, and see, these variants have tiny mutations, very, very tiny changes. Now, these tiny changes can have an impact, but not necessarily against the antibodies. Antibodies are large molecules. They are looking for an overall structure. They're not looking for that exact antibody, that exact mutation site. And antibodies are not like a clone. They are not identical. They will sort of make against different parts of this structure that we present to them. So there is still a very high probability that there will be some amount of antibody against all these variants.
Okay.
Which is, I think, what Moderna is saying, that their vaccine, which they've started the study on against these new variants, it's still pretty effective, and they're still getting enough antibody response for it to be considered an effective vaccine. I've not seen the data from the others, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. So if you are vaccinated, you still have a chance to carry the infection and pass it on to others?
There is a very theoretical scenario. So when I'm given the vaccine, I'm given an injection, right? And then if I see whether I have antibodies or not just me, everybody is tested by drawing blood. Now, the blood circulates everywhere, and we look for circulating antibodies. However, we know that there is infection in the nose and the throat. We don't know how much antibody is actually there in those cells. It cannot be measured. So there is a theoretical scenario where you could be protecting yourself with the antibodies against severe infection, but you could still get the infection and pass it to others. That's why it's important that everybody get vaccinated as long as it is safe to do so.
And it's important that you continue to wear a mask, physically distance, in crowded places or anywhere else.
Yes, please, until everybody is vaccinated. That's the safest thing you can do for yourself and your loved ones.
Do you think there's a second wave coming?
See, the waves are just the number of cases. You have a physical restriction, the number of cases go down. You open up and then the number of cases come up. So that's typically how infections have spread. Now, with the vaccine, with effective disbursement of the vaccine, we can sort of prevent and allow this number of infections to plateau along with the vaccine and maintaining our own discipline in preventing the spread of the infection.
Okay. A day back, both the Serum Institute of India and Bharat Biotech have approached the drug controller of India about allowing these vaccines for those on blood thinners. So right now, I know they say people on blood thinners can't take it. Could you talk about who can't take this vaccine?
I actually don't know enough physiology to say why being on blood thinners is a contraindication. So I would be the wrong person to be answering this question. That being said, I know there is a lot of fear, hesitation in giving any new vaccine or drug to pregnant women, to breastfeeding women, people that have suppressed immune systems. I think at this point, only Pfizer and Moderna have been approved for people that have suppressed immune systems. Like suppressed immune system can be because you have an autoimmune disorder, could be because you have cancer, could be because you have HIV and AIDS, could be because you have had some organ transplant and you have to take this immunosuppressant drugs. So generally, this is what happens. These are the people that have been told to avoid these vaccines. And Covaxin has a new adjuvant that has not been tested in the large population. So that's why Covaxin specifically says those with severe allergies to not take them, because we simply don't have the data on the use of this adjuvant in people.
Could you explain that, doctor? What is that adjuvant?
So adjuvants are things that are added to vaccines to enhance the immune response. I don't. So it's sort of like enhancing the flavor of something. It's not bad. It's not. It's not something illicit. It's not a filler or anything. It plays an important role. The adjuvant that has been used in Covaxin, the name slips my mind right now, has not been tested in the past. So it is expected to help Covaxin give a very good immune response, but we don't know whether it can cause any allergies in people or not yet.
And I think that's what the phase 3 trial is about. I think they've recruited about 26,000 people.
Yes, the data from that would be wonderful to see.
Yeah, I think it's expected around March sometime is what the news has been saying. Yeah, hopefully it'll come out soon.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? I mean, tracking 26,000 people, getting their blood, testing it, analyzing it, seeing what it means, doing the statistics on it. So we're actually working at breakneck speed. This has never happened in the past, which makes people a bit more skeptical. But actually, to me, as a scientist, this is very exciting because we're putting all the knowledge, the information, the technology that we have developed over the years into one focused goal of preventing an infection. So we are never in a situation where you take for granted saying, yes, this person died of this infection. Instead, we're actively fighting against it.
Yeah.
This is a scenario we had 50 years back where they'll say, oh, yeah, this person died of smallpox. We managed to remove that infection. We used to say, oh my God, polio, and people were maimed. We don't have that anymore. And we have the ability to do that in a year. This is just unheard of in terms of timelines, in terms of developing a vaccine.
That's true. But do you think we could have relied on Covishield for the time being and then waited for Covaxin to finish its trials and then, it would have been more robust?
That is a decision that I have.
I know we can just speculate.
Yeah, I don't know. I simply don't know is all I can say. Maybe not. I don't know what the compulsion was to do it at this time. There are many layers to it which we can't delve into it, is my opinion.
Would you, just out of curiosity, you needn't answer this if you want to, would you have taken Covaxin if that was the vaccine that was given to you?
If I was not breastfeeding, I would take it, yeah.
Okay. So you were more comfortable with Covishield since you were breastfeeding?
Yes.
Any other important information you would like to add before I end this?
This has been a lot of fun, actually, because it's nice to get the science through to a lot of people. What I would like to add is don't fall victim to these rubbish rumors that spread. Please don't, because the science behind each of these things can be explained. Rubbish rumors will only give you, is all about fear mongering and just make you question everything that's happening without really having an answer. There's a forward that's going around saying, why should I take it? Does it change this? Does it change that? Eventually, it will all come to fruition if we follow the steps. They say, herd immunity is already achieved. Herd immunity can never be achieved for a natural infection. If that was the case, we would have never had chickenpox, we would have never had measles, we would have never had mumps without a vaccine. They would have all gone without a vaccine intervention. It's never the case. So get your facts right and don't succumb to these rumors. That's what is very frustrating when you see educated people giving into these rumors and questioning the science. If you have concerns, reach out, ask, read. Don't believe these WhatsApp forwards. Unless it's my video, in which case I am talking only facts.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Pavitra. It was very eye-opening to talk to you.
It was a pleasure talking to you too, Madhi.
If you have any further doubts regarding the vaccines, please reach Dr. Pavitra on our Insta page at Pavitra Venkata Gopalan. Stay safe.